A year ago, I bought an apartment on the 4th floor of an old building. I purchased it from an elderly man. The apartment was well kept, a bit old-fashioned, but perfect for me at that point in my life. On my second day there, I heard a knock at the door, even though the doorbell worked just fine. I thought it must be the neighbors, so I went to answer it. I was startled. A frail old woman stood on the doorstep, and just seeing her sent shivers down my spine. She was dressed in black, her head bowed, and a terrible smell filled the hallway. She asked if I could call for Elizabeth, the previous owner of the apartment. I told her that the old owner had moved out, and I had just moved in the day before, so I couldn't help her. She just stared at me, making no move to leave. Unsure of what to do, I politely said goodbye and closed the door in her face. I peeked through the peephole and saw that she was still standing there, unmoving. I had the eerie feeling she knew I was watching her. After what felt like an eternity, she slowly turned and began climbing the stairs. It took her 2 whole minutes to ascend. I considered offering to help her, but the terrible smell made me think twice. Eventually, she disappeared into her apartment, and I closed my door. The next day, the same thing happened. This time, after I told her that the previous owner had moved, she asked for food. I went to the kitchen and gave her whatever I could find in my fridge. I'd lost my appetite anyway. I handed it over and shut the door. This became a daily routine. She'd knock, ask for food, and eventually she even started asking for money. One day, I decided to find out more about my daily visitor, so I went down to the courtyard. I learned that she spent her entire pension on alcohol and then begged from the neighbors. No one opened their doors for her anymore. They also told me her granddaughter lived in the next building, but had no interest in the old woman. If anyone brought her up, the granddaughter would quickly change the subject. After that, I decided to stop opening the door. She'd still come by, knock for a few minutes, and then leave. And then one day she vanished. I later found out she'd been taken to a nursing home. About a year passed after all of this. Suddenly one night I heard knocking at the door. I walked over and saw the same old woman standing there. Had they released her from the nursing home or had she escaped? She was dressed as usual. Of course, I didn't open the door. I wasn't dressed and I just stood there for several minutes. I checked a few times and she was still there, unmoving. Suddenly, she started walking up the stairs. But not normally. She was moving backward and she was watching my door the entire time. I didn't know what to think. Maybe she'd gone mad in the nursing home. I crawled back into bed and eventually managed to fall asleep. Early in the morning, I woke up to noise in the hallway. I went outside and saw her granddaughter with a few police officers. I went downstairs, and a few elderly residents were sitting outside. I asked them what was going on. I found out the old woman who knocked on my door the previous night had died 2 days ago in the nursing home. I was shocked, but said nothing. I decided to forget the whole thing. That night, I was woken up by loud banging on my door. I rushed to the door and looked through the peephole. Of course it was her again. She stood there completely still, but the banging continued. I was so terrified that I collapsed, and on my hands and knees, I crawled back to my bed and lay down. The banging didn't stop. I don't remember what happened next. Either I passed out or the noise finally ceased. As soon as daylight broke, I got up and stood by the door. I waited for someone to walk by. I didn't want to go out alone. Finally, I rushed out and went to a bar near the building. I put the apartment up for sale immediately and never went back.